Mr. Bernstein, take it away.
Very good. Hello, everybody. It's Sunday, February 9th, and it's Tinderbox Meetup with Michael Becker. I'm Mark Bernstein, designer of Tinderbox, and I am up to my elbows this morning in Super Bowl mushroom tart. So we are having lots of fun with pate brisée already today, also with a variety of Tinderbox errors, but let that pass. Everything is more or less under control. Yes, Tinderbox Super Bowl. So welcome, and here's Michael Becker.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the meetup. Our format is we go around the room and we have new people introduce themselves. If we have a theme, we jump into that theme, which we do not have this week. If we have any pet projects or things that we're working on, we can ask the questions for help, ask the community for help, or we can demonstrate our projects. And we have somewhat of a unpublished pseudo theme. Actually, it wasn't. If we have a published theme, we jump right in. We actually have an unpublished pseudo theme. Is Mr. Anderson and I have a weekly Thursday hour and a half, sometimes 2 hour, depending on how excited we get about it. Personal Tinderbox meetup get together. And one of the things I've been doing with the templates and stuff that I've been building out is wanting to copy like a template or an action code library, like a function or a stamp, over into a brand new Tinderbox, and then have a method to be able to have Tinderbox automatically detect the attributes that are being used within that function or in that template, and then generate them for that new file you've just pasted your library or your template into. So that way it would allow for more portability. And I was sharing kind of like my early thinking with that with Mark, and unfortunately I gave him the bug, and I think he lost like a day and a half playing with the idea between now and then. So the unprompt theme is for Mark to demonstrate to us the work he's been doing over since Thursday on playing with this idea and how we can automagically detect attributes within a template or a block of action code, and then automatically generate those into another project. And we're both coming at it from slightly different approaches, but he's got a more refined demo than I do at this point. So we're the unplanned theme is for Mark to share what where he's at with that project. But before we get into that, does anybody have any thoughts, ideas, updates? And Bruce, any additional updates from your end from the work you were doing from a week or so ago?
No, I mean, there's a few things that I need to figure out. I'm actually in Pismo Beach at the moment, so the background behind me is real. Uh, so I will say this, ever since our meeting, I'm simply using it more efficiently. And so we'll leave it at that. But actually, I will ask one question. So one of the things that I'm going to do on this trip. I'm working for a school district, but not till later in the week, and I'm about to take all of the chapters I've written and put them in. And I'm sort of thinking about the organization of that, because some of the chapters are done and they're ready for final critiques or whatever. Others are works in progress, and just kind of how I organize it is something. Am I just putting chapter one, chapter two, and then within those chapters, do I have my full draft? Do I have my exploded portions? Do I separate it into larger sections where I have just my finished drafts, maybe just under the root, and then further down are my works in progress, and I use an alias? So I'm wondering if anybody who has done long writing with Tinderbox has thoughts about that.
I do,
What, Michael? Well, let's call on you.
Dave has his hand up first.
I was just going to brag a little bit, because there's always more than one way to skin a cat. Captain's log was working flawlessly for like a year, and recently we're up to like 340 notes, I think. in the mid-watch entry was a new day wasn't being added to each month. So like it began in February, early part of February. So I would get an alert from Automator that it could not get a variable that it needed because the note didn't exist. Or I'm not exactly sure what it referenced, but what I knew from Automator running was that the note was created. It started the Automator function, and then the Automator function errored out, and the note never appeared. They're not connected in any way. Why that should prevent the new day's note from populating in the month container was a mystery. But I commented out the edict that ran mid-watch and placed that as a rule because I figured the rule would run at some point after the note was created. And that would make mid-watch would run only when the note was definitely in place. I don't know if there's a difference between edict and rule in terms of where they are in the priority queue, but that has seemed to solve the problem. I haven't had a glitch since then. But I'm guessing that has something to do, and I wasn't turning the edict off. So I think as it was reading through 300 some odd notes and looking at edicts, and it was all create in there and it was already created. So I should make a stamp and go back and turn off all those edicts coming out of it. So at least it relieves that workload. But I solved my own problem, didn't have to go to the forum, didn't have to email Mark Anderson. So I'm very proud of myself.
Nice. Congrats.
But that answers it. I want to thank you, everyone. That solved my problem completely.
Yeah, I know. No, sorry. So Bruce, there's as Dave said, there's a lot of ways to skin this cat. And one way is to, and why don't we just go ahead and share screen too? So sometimes it helps to visualize. Let me get up on the screen, pull this out of the way. Go ahead and share desktop 4. All right, and let me pull up a new Tinderbox file. Oops. Come on, where's my mouse? All right, so there's a lot of ways to skin this different cat when you're doing this. Where'd you guys go? There you are. You're on my other monitor over here. Okay, so one way, let's go ahead and add some notes. Okay. Okay, so if we go like this, right, and we outline. So let's say this is, whatever your content is. So depending on, you could add a flag. So you could add an attribute in your file that says like is, you could add a status. You could add one that says, is production, is review, is production. Yeah, so you could add different kinds of booleans as a way to do that, and then you could add like a status a status function, and then a really simple way to do this is use checkboxes, and you could just kind of have this checkbox, right? So if it's unchecked, so one method is if it's unchecked, then and then to show you the checkbox, and let's go up here and add a prototype real quick just to facilitate this.
Michael,
yeah.
as you're doing this, the idea when I've got hundreds of notes of using checkboxes makes me worry that I'm going to make a mistake on one. So all it would take is one to, and I kind of like your alternate solution of using a display expression.
Yeah.
I'm wondering what you think about that.
No, that's where I was going with that. But, as opposed to going to the nth degree of a bunch of coding, I'm trying to demonstrate the kind of layers of complexity that one could have. So in so let's start with the simplest layer of complexity. The simplest layer of complexity, and they're not mutually exclusive. You can kind of do both while you're doing your work. But the simplest layer of complexity is to have, and let's assign the assign the prototype to all those. Okay. So one way is to have the, the checkbox idea, this is kind of ready. This is not ready. Another way is to have flags for yourself. Flags. And honestly, I would do a mixture of this. And we can automate it pretty quickly right now. But like, let's say this note is red. And this note is green. Why am I? Oh, I'm doing. Sorry, I'm doing this. I'm doing it wrong here. Flag. So if you put flags in, right? So I can go and say, you could say when it's red, it needs work, and when it's green, and this has the same potential issue as the checkboxes, is there's a manual element to that. So you could kind of establish, so if you're not using the display expression, you could be giving yourself like a flag indicator. This note's red, this note's green, or this rolling up of those notes are red or green. So that's one way to do it. Another way to do it is to give yourself a status. So if we go ahead here, just for ease of use, we created the user generated attribute status. So we'll go in and give it some suggestions like, give me some statuses in progress.
Well, it could be first draft, second draft, reviewed by
Draft.
final copy.
And review, and let's just say final. So let's say you have those three statuses, right? So you could have a note in here that says, this note, and we could go down here and we could stay by default. Our status is draft, right? So at any point in time, this one we've got to update our. By the way, too, so I've broken the inheritance on this note C. So if I right mouse click on the item, I can go ahead and re-inherit. It's just a little tip and trick, by the way. If you notice that one of your,
so you don't have to open attributes. That's nice.
Right. Yeah. So that's just a little tip and trick. If you notice that for some reason, a particular individual attribute is not inheriting properly, you can re-inherit pretty quickly by doing that. And you'll notice that when these are bold versus unbolded, that tells you whether or not they're inheriting or local. So there's some really nice little signals there.
And Michael, I don't know if this changes anything, and I find myself also curious. I don't know if you have any comments, Mark, B, when he's done, because I hear you like to write books, and I would be very, very curious to know what your approach is. But as we're going through this, I think about the idea that maybe for chapter 10, there's an interview that I had recorded that I have to go through, and maybe there's some old archival material and things of that nature. So I'm wondering how, as part of the organizational process toward completion, you would weave that into it.
I'll say that again, just so we capture the yeah. So you've got some archive. You said but I just want to understand.
So I was saying,
I didn't hear a requirement. So I've got some archival material, and I want to do what with it? I want to know that it's been processed. I wanted to know that it's been integrated.
Yes, the latter. In other words, that I have a process to do list, if you will, with specifics of what it is that I need to do to finish that chapter, and then I'm keeping track of the status as I'm doing that, and that's chapter by chapter.
Mm-hmm. So a couple. Let's do this then real quick. So we're doing this writings. So here's your writings as a folder. And then here is your resources folder. Right. And so and again, we don't have time to go through this right now, but let's say this is like our, asset one.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So you have some assets that you're writing, and for now, let's call this chapter 1. And this is chapter 2. Right. So at the simplest of levels, and based on what we've done in the past, that we can automate the hell out of this to make a lot of this work. But let's say you're saying, I want asset 1 to be associated with chapter 1, and I want asset 2 to be associated with chapter 2. And this goes a lot down to what we've been doing with Win 2 and the development of courseware. Like, how do I know that this asset has actually made it into the book? And where do I want it to be in the book? So what you could also do as part of this process, we could say assets. Right, so we've got an attribute called assets, and we'll make that a set. Okay, and now this is where we can start applying some action code. So I can come into, and normally I would do this as an on visit, but let me bring this up here. So if we go into here and we're going to write some action code on the edict, and we'll say, assets equals link dot inbound dot set dot name. Okay, so one way to go about doing that is you're basically saying if I have any of these assets linked to a particular note, I then can look at that. And so now let's just double check.
And so that's something I'm not sure exactly how to find. I'm not so good on queries.
Right, but watch this. And we can work on queries at another time too.
Sure.
But if we do this, I think I do something wrong in the I think I
You
did something
misspelled
wrong.
assets.
Yeah, here. That's spelled right now? No, it's asset. I've got to do it down here. So what we're doing here is we're saying, look at our inbound links. And if the type is asset, bring the name into the set we're calling assets. So now if I go ahead and do that, you'll see I've got asset 1 here. And so one like quick and dirty way to do that would be is, let's say if we have asset 3, you could say, like, look, if I have any assets in my asset library and they don't have a link, that tells me I've not associated them with the chapter. Now that doesn't tell you whether or not you've actually done the writing to integrate them, but maybe you kind of build your own working convention that says, once I've actually written something about an asset in a particular chapter, I make that link happen. And then that's your little flag for yourself that says, this asset has been incorporated somewhere. Mr. Bernstein, you got a question?
Yeah, I thought maybe
Or comment, I should say.
Can I share?
Of course.
Let's see if we can do this. There we go. Just for fun, I wrestle with this problem all the time, and I've got a very low-tech way of dealing with it. My problem was one day also at a beach, I outlined what I hope will be the next book. And so I've got 2 problems. First, I've got going to have things that I put in one chapter don't fit there, get thrown away when they really ought to be used in another chapter. More important, I have things that are interesting, but I don't really know where they fit. This is going to be made worse over time because the chapters are going to change. And so stuff that seemed to be really appropriate for chapter 4 are going to be excluded, not because don't belong in the book, but because chapter 4's topic has drifted to something else. And then there's always the problem of I'm reading something in the library and I'm busy and it's interesting, but I don't know what it is where it is I want to put it. So if I'm reading and it obviously fits in a place in the outline, I put the note in the outline. There it goes. If I don't know what it is, I've got where it should go. I've got a huge container of stuff that I want to get around to reading. And this started out large and has become much too large. But if I'm actually reading one of these, I take the notes inside the source and then move them where they belong when I have an opportunity to do that. So this combination, and of course, flags for things that I particularly want to see, or these flags are for things that I actually have but don't own. So they have to be used expeditiously. Uh,
Mark, would it be
yeah,
okay to ask you to show the attributes?
uh,
Do you mind?
it would be fun, but there aren't in this particular document. I'm just not doing much automation.
Oh,
Uh,
you're using the Bruce method.
yeah, in this case, because I really don't know how to automate this point. Uh, and
That's
I
interesting.
really emphatically want to avoid uh, premature formalization in this because I really don't know where this book is going to go. But I know that there are interesting things here, and it's time to write them down.
But this is helpful to see both perspectives. And I think and this is exactly my conundrum. I keep going back and forth, which is not useful in itself. You need to just pick one and stick with it. And then if I decide to do a wholesale switch, fine. Um, but the other piece of this is I'm told over and over again, what I'm writing, or anyone who doesn't know, it's best to call it, I guess, it's almost a nonfiction memoir of my times with myself and my brother. And he was an older brother who was both a genius, kind of abusive, and had mental illness. And I was integrally involved with all of those aspects for many, many years. So my point is, as I'm getting all kinds of advice, I'm told, well, I desperately need an agent. Otherwise, the book will just get lost, and I'll have put in 30 years of effort for not much. And I'm also told not to write the entire book before getting an agent because they may feel that certain things or organization may need to alter. And so I'm still writing. I'm writing, getting back to trying to really do it daily. I had a couple of weeks that I couldn't. But my point is that I want it to be in a flexible format that when someone says this needs to be changed, I'm not hard coded and locked into something that I don't know where to go. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that's a good concern. And uh, the, as long as you have written the stuff down, I think you shouldn't be too scared about massive changes. Uh, Fiction writers get advice all the time that, like, an editor says, I'll buy this book, but it has to be first person. So you're going to end up changing every pronoun in the entire book. Um, but that's something that people do. It takes weeks, but people do it. Uh, if you don't write something down, though, you can go for a incredible wild goose chase. And so writing it down and not throwing it away when you yank it out of its original context, put it back into the source where you have some chance to find it again.
This is really helpful. And I think what I'll do is, that's what I'm doing after this meeting is the next 3 days are writing before I have to do some work. Um, Michael, I so much respect your approach with these. What Mark is showing just feels more comfortable to me. It feels more
Sure.
like the way that I operate. And so I think that I'm going to see how I might, you know, organize things. I'm somewhat leaning toward that organization, but because I have a hybrid between the two, frankly, I don't like it at the moment. I know you're in charge, but I see a couple of hands up.
Go for it. No, you're driving the conversation. Go for it.
Gee, Chuck or Art. What a decision. Well, we'll go on my. I don't know. Somebody want to speak up? I can't decide. They
Chuck,
both
you
have
go.
valuable comments
Chuck, you go.
usually.
Yeah, I have a quick comment, which is just I did some writing last week as well, and visiting grandson just gave me a few hours to write some stuff down that I've been meaning to do. And I just went into Tinderbox, used actually an old version of it because I had it on an old laptop, and just started writing. And it reminded me again that I actually use Tinderbox in two very different ways. One is where I'm doing a lot of programmatic work. I'm automating things. I'm importing, exporting, doing all kinds of manipulations of knowledge I'm collecting. And at other times, I use it just like a writing tool. And I guess that speaks, in my mind anyway, to the incredible power of Tinderbox, is that it can be automated, but it can also just be someplace to capture your thoughts. And I think we often overlook that it's just a writing tool aspect of Tinderbox, and I think that deserves a lot of attention as well. Enough said.
All right. And who else had their hand up? Looks like Art has his hand up.
So hey Bruce, so I'm curious, on a scale of 1 to 10, how far would you say you're along in your manuscript? If 1 was the day you got the idea and 10 is what you're hoping to hand over as a finished manuscript.
Bruce, did you hear that?
Maybe
You're on
not.
mute. I don't think he did.
Hey Bruce,
You're on mute, Bruce.
maybe we can type in the chat because
Yeah, we seem to have lost him here. Or he's lost the screen somewhere.
Bruce seems to be having a problem that I frequently have, which is Zoom just loses your audio. I don't know why.
I think he was playing with his headset and something happened there. There you go. And he's back.
Bruce, can you hear us?
Oh, great. Okay, we're back.
There we are. Hey, so I'll just repeat my question, Bruce. Hey, so on a scale of 1 to 10, how far along do you think you would say you are on your effort? If say 1 was the initial concept for the idea and 10 is the finished manuscript you're hoping to hand over to someone to read.
A 6.
Okay, excellent. And so then based on that, so if you have like say an interview or an excerpt or something that relates to some real-time thing that was taking place during that timeline, you might already have somewhat of a structure and organization in place. So you might already have a sense, oh, I'll put this in say section 3, 1983 to 1989 when so-and-so was going on. You probably have an idea that close, you would say?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, so in that case, I mean, it really, if I were in your place, I would probably just have a sheet and start organizing things, even with a pen and paper, because it's easy, but also in Tinderbox, it's super easy because you just create an alias to say that interview or whatever it is, and you drop it into the folder. And so you'll always remember, or I would have a little checklist at the beginning of every section to ensure that I attach and put stuff in. And so every once in a while, I just go through my checklists and see how I'm doing in those sections. Because really, there's no substitute for sort of weaving. You're going to read through the whole thing 100 times in any case between now and the day you're done. You know?
Right. Well, that's where we are. There's certain things that are in one chapter that then come back and reappear in another chapter, and keeping track of all the characters. There's probably 50 of them. So there's those organizational pieces. but yeah, that's certainly good advice. At the
And
moment,
also sometimes,
go ahead.
sorry, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was just going to say I have quite a bit of it in Scrivener that I've moved over back to Tinderbox simply because I'm finding the Tinderbox environment just to be more flexible, and I don't worry as much about the aspects of what view I'm using. It's just working better for me.
For sure, for sure. In fact, very interestingly, as you were discussing it, I had a mental visual of Scrivener as in terms of their corkboard paradigm, which is something you can easily replicate in Tinderbox, but then you have so much more power. And sort of adjacent to that point, I would just lastly suggest that one of the things I tend to do sometimes when I have a glom of notes is I'll just create a user attribute, like say, special comments or referential comments. So just create that attribute and then you can drop notes in it. And later on with an agent, it's really easy to gather the contents of all those comments. And then you can sift through it and go, oh yeah, I need to do this on that note. I need to do X on the other note. Super practical. Anyway, that's
Good.
all I have to say.
Well, I don't want to take more time from the group on this. I very much appreciate it. It's actually extremely timely as I have nothing but writing and beach ahead of me for the next 2 to 3 days.
That's nice.
Yep.
I've just got one more little demo I want to show you just a second. If I can get this done quickly, I can show you this. View text, view draft. I think this is going to work. Just give me 90 seconds to see if I can figure this out. Okay, let's let Mark Anderson go. I'm gonna do something while Mark is going, and I'm gonna circle back and show you a little bit more. I know the manual thing works out, Bruce, but since we're on it, I kind of want to show for the people that might be listening
love
to this
to
in the
automate.
future. Well, I think it's just why have to do the work multiple times?
You know
And be
what?
kind to your future self.
I have an answer to that though. I sometimes find the process of manually going through it helps my thinking, and it helps me put together what it is. Sometimes I'll be manually linking something, then suddenly I'll have a thought, oh, I forgot this, and then I'll add that. So I kind of like a healthy balance between the manual portion of it, and I always appreciate the automation. Just a quick comment. I just want to comment to Chuck. Chuck, I missed your entire comment because of a headphone snafu. So I will be sure to listen to the recording and hear what you had to say, because I always value your comments. Back to you, Mike. I'm sorry. Back to you, Mike.
No worries. Okay, so let's go. But my one comment there is, I agree. If you're kind of doing a one-off project and you're thinking about it, that whole manual, creative, get close to your data stuff, that really is critically important. And yet at the same time, if you find yourself doing something more than say 2 or 3 times, automate it, right? So because that automation then will allow you to spend your time being close to your data than having to do repeated things that you wouldn't necessarily have to do, like the cleanup stuff and all that. So I think you're absolutely right that there's a fine balance.
I also have a question which doesn't have to be for right now, but it may be for you or others. I'm finding a little bit of back and forth between whether I use an image or whether I use a poster. And I'm wondering if anyone has any guidance about when's best to use one versus the other.
What do you mean image versus poster?
Well, okay, that wasn't clear. So I mean image as in the note is a pasted image versus that I've turned it into a poster.
But for what end or for what purpose? So are you using an image to be able to include it in the book? And excuse me, let me ask a question. Are you using it in an image to be able to include it in the book and export it to hand it off to somebody else? Or are you using it to view it as a poster to be able to view it in map view or in preview to be able to help you with your thinking process?
You're there, actually both.
Okay, so the answer is do both. Right?
Can you resize? Can you resize a poster?
Absolutely, just by dragging the
Okay.
size of the, by changing the poster, the poster image size.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay, I'm doing something wrong because I'm finding it truncates the image.
That's simply, we can look at, if you want, we can talk offline, or we can pull it up now, but that's, the poster has a width and a height, presumably, within its template, and you can adjust that. And if you variabilize that with an attribute, you can, use attribute values to inform your poster to do that.
Okay, well, I don't want to take us away from the demo you had planned, and I feel like I've gotten what I need, but Mark, you were going to make a comment.
Yeah, are you using a poster or are you using an image adornment?
To my knowledge of using a poster.
Okay. Um, if you start with, say, a JPEG from a photograph, and you want to put that into the map view, the most common way to do that is to just drag the image into the map view. That becomes an image adornment. You can resize that, but as I recall, it works to fit, it works to keep the proportions. So as you change the width and the height, it will grow so that it expands all the way on one, and you see the top part on the other.
Okay, I think yeah, I don't think that I've tried to drag things in map view. I've pretty much just done a copy and paste from Snagit and
Or if you
put it
paste
in.
an image, yes.
Exactly.
It will try to, it will keep the same aspect ratio. So for the image. So as you resize it, it's going to clip in one direction or the other and fill in the other direction.
Great. Okay. I think I'll play around with those over the next week.
I might throw in
Okay.
one more thought on that. It's just that if it's just a picture, if say it's a headshot of somebody, it's hard to think that you would need a poster to show that, because the picture is not going to change. If, however, you've got, say, a JPEG, which is an export of your Excel chart, then that's a different case, because you think, actually, wouldn't it be more useful if I showed the live chart, because then I can change the figures and I can see a change. So that's a place where you might want to use a poster, either internally or externally, in terms of the way you display things, because essentially the picture as you're imagining it may change over the time that you're working on things. But if you're starting with a picture, you broadly, I suspect in most cases, just need a picture. So a picture either inserted into a text, or often more usefully just done as something like a picture of Dawn, as Mark's just explained, will probably get you to where you need to go.
That's helpful, and that's what I've done most of the time, because some of this are old ads from speakers that he had a company, and other news clippings and things of that nature. So just having the pasted graphic as part of the notes to refer to has been most helpful, and some of those I'm going to want to include into the final manuscript. Well, thank you. I've taken a lot of time. I appreciate it. Let me fade into the background, please.
Well, actually, let me do one more thing, Bruce, if you don't
Or
mind.
not. That was
So,
the other
yeah,
choice.
but this is not just for you, this is for everyone. So while I think I got it finally tweaked out. So some of the other things to be thinking about when you're doing versioning like this is if you look here, and I'll explain it in a minute. So if you look at the note, and we'll look at the edict real quick. So there's different things to think about, right? So you can, as we were talking about, you can change the colors. So like and you can, as you were saying, you can use display expression, right? So if the status is draft, its color is blank and its flags are blank. If its status is in review, its color is poppy and its display expression is in review, and its flags are orange. If it's green, it's green, and and then you can be showing the display expression in different ways. So
Michael, the edict isn't on screen. If you were hoping we were looking.
Oh, sorry. I've got multiple screens. There you go. So if you're looking at the edicts, so you can basically, and again, I'm cramming a whole bunch of automation into one. You still don't see it?
No.
Oh, I've got to pull it up from. How about now?
No.
That is so
It needs
weird.
to be in front of your 5Cs window. Your 5Cs.
Are you not seeing? Just not. I just got to see what screen you guys are seeing.
No, we're seeing something called Outline 5C's Personal Knowledge Management
Yeah,
Project, and then one in front of it saying.
That's the wrong screen. You should be seeing this. Okay. How about that? All right.
You will
so
see
now,
only what I want you to see.
Yeah. So now you'll see, so, and again, I'm cramming a whole bunch of stuff into one place, as opposed to, I wouldn't necessarily do all of this, in one thing. You'll pick or choose the things that work for you. But we talked about there being the checkboxes. We talked about there, using colors or flags to help you differentiate. So if I go in here and say, like, now this part of the book is in review, Tinderbox is going to automatically flag and show you that distinction. And then the other thing that I find really, really helpful for this is all of this kind of internal coloring and display expressions and flags and checkboxes. That's all for my internal self, right? That's for me to be able to know, what I, where I'm at with the process, with the particular writing and all of that. But then while you guys were speaking, I went off and wrote this quick little version. Mine personal one's much more complex. But if you look in here, when I actually hand something off to a publisher, I actually create a draft of the content. And so if you look here, this script is basically saying, create a version number, export the current text of the selected note to a variable called vstring or vtext. Create a note with the name of the note that I've got selected plus the version number, and then go and then create that note in a draft folder. And so if we do that, let's say I want to go give my publisher a copy of draft 1. So now all I need to do is apply that stamp, and it automatically creates a publisher ready version of draft 1. And you can enhance this even more to include, like, put the publishing, populated date attribute. Populate this. So now I can go ahead and export this chapter to and hand it off to my publisher. And so that way I know, and I can then put other attributes like gave to publisher on such and such a date, et cetera, et cetera. But now not only do I have internal tracking with where I'm at with my reviews, I actually have a copy of the content that I actually handed off to the publisher. And so let's say we go and do it again. Now I've got draft 2. Now I've got draft 3. Here's a draft of chapter 2. And this allows you to start memorializing your drafted versions of the book. Does that make sense? Anybody else have any comments on that before we move over to Mr. Anderson? Or did I just kind of melted everybody's brain and they're like totally useless?
I think mine a little bit.
What?
I think
I'm
so.
sorry,
Mine
I
a little bit. I think mine a little bit. Yeah.
All right.
But
So let's
it's
just
11:15 at night here. So.
But again, so we've talked about showing all the visualizations to help us know where we're in our development and writing process. And then what I'm doing here is I'm basically just saying, hey, Tinderbox, create me a version number and put it on the content that I'm driving. Then using the operator exported string, take the selected note, which is this, apply the HTML page template to it. And what that HTML page doing is it's exporting all of the current note plus all of its children to a variable called vtext. And then I'm telling Tinderbox, create a note name, take a note, give it its name, plus the version number attribute. And now I'm saying, go and create in the drafts folder, the name of the note being note, and then I'm saying make the text of v note equal to v text, which we had just exported, and then add version 1 to that. So the next time I do it again, I'm going to get a new version number. And that is
excellent.
like
So you're assembling your
yeah, and
notes
so
for your for your draft.
that is the quick and dirty way to generate a draft, much like in Scrivener where they say create a history version or create a save a view of this particular note in its current state. That's how you would do that.
Very cool. Very
And again, my version is like insanely complex because I have so many different flags, and it goes to pandoc, and it does citation keys, and it does dates and all of that. But the quick and dirty of creating yourself an archived draft note of what you're currently working on is basically to do that.
And I would assume that a step like this is probably most useful when you're sort of at the end stage, when you have it already, you have entire sets of manuscripts where you're making 1 or 2 incremental changes here and there, and then blasting out another.
Maybe. I mean, it's also just for your like internal self. You're halfway through and you don't want to screw it up. You don't want to accidentally delete something. Right.
Yeah,
Because
I
right
can see
now,
that.
because right now what I've basically done here is I've compiled this all into the draft as a complete HTML ready version. I could have easily just done this as like exported into this draft as a markdown, or exported in this draft as to plain text notes. It could be any kind of output depending on the template you've assigned. But it's just a way for you to it's a way for you to archive for yourself a block of where your writing is at this moment.
Yeah.
For whatever purpose or reason why you'd want to do that.
And then you can always manually override, of course, that number, because it's just applied a new number, an incremental number to that
For sure.
variable, right?
For sure. And you could go back and reset it, and you can go back and change it. I mean, there's just, it's Tinderbox, so you can do anything you want. But so Bruce, there's the kind of methodically giving you your kind of the signposts of where I am at with my development using colors and flags and checkboxes and all of that, display expressions. And then there's that creating that persistent archive of a draft that you're then going to not touch, because then that's the thing I've stuck over here and tells me that I did something with it. And at that date, I gave it to this person, and that's what they saw. And it's now memorialized.
Yeah, that's helpful. Sorry, I was on mute.
Yeah. All right. I'll share this file later so people can play with it. But I just kind of wanted to complete that. I mean, obviously, I had 5 or 10 minutes while you guys were talking to throw this together. So it could be more.
Remind me, I know you said when you do an HTML export that Word is not going to read the headers properly. So what format are you sending it to someone if you've exported it in HTML?
Well, yeah. So, well, I mean, you could send it to Word if you don't need to use the Word's ability to adjust formatting and headings and all that, or you drop it into Google Docs, which it would accept the header settings and then share the Google Doc with them. But if it's needing to go to Word, there is some div tags that you need to wrap around in your export template to force Word to recognize the tags. It's not hard. You just need, and I can share details on that later. It's just you just need to know to wrap the div tags just like you would do an email with to make sure that it functions within the Microsoft environment.
I have managed to stay away from Word more and more. I don't think I've used it in a month.
I can't stand it, but it's just here nor there. Yeah. Okay. So that was a great question, Bruce. Thank you for that.
Sure. Thank you all.
Mr. Anderson, the floor is yours.
Now, hopefully I'm sharing. A, can you hear me? And B, am I sharing my screen?
You are sharing, and yes, we can hear you.
Okay, right. So, this fell out from a conversation with Michael a few days ago, and has, like Topsy, growed. And I get it, spoiler alert, this doesn't quite work, but it's actually useful to show it to you because it does sort of reinforce the point about expectations. but it gets us most of the way. And if you really, really needed to do the thing I'm about to show you today, you can manually work around it quite fast. So the start point was that Michael has done some sort of basically some libraries, and he was thinking about, well, if I wanted to share this with somebody else, it's going to need a certain amount of mise en place done, because it needs to set up. It uses things like user attributes, and they need to be set up before you use them. So how might we go about that? In his case, he was trying to use a subset of user attributes as only used by that library. I've taken a simpler version here for this demo, just to do the basics, but it would be very easy to change this. So the way I thought about it was, I was thinking, well, actually, right. So what I really need to do is I need to store the information somewhere about all the configuration information I need for the user attributes, so that I can do them in another doc. So after a few false starts, what I actually came up with is this stamp. So first of all, what we do is we go away and we ask the document, we ask the document command, give me all the user attributes, and which is this thing here, and that passes us back one of the properties of the document object of information about the document, which is a list of user attributes. So now I have a list of user attributes. And sorry, I should explain that. Let me just bring up this. I basically made just 3 very ordinary things, because I didn't need tons of information to know if this worked or not. In fact, I didn't want too much information, because it just means the chances of you hitting some weird edge case are improved. As it happens, I hit all the edge cases, but we'll come to that in a moment. So in this example, there are actually only 3 user attributes. So then I say to them, and then I thought, oh, right. So the next problem is that I need the information, but I need to make the attribute in another document. And if we go and look at the create attribute command, it takes only 2 things. It takes the name and the type. Now, once you've set them up, then you can customize them further. So, right, I'm going to need 2 bits of information. The first thing is I'm going to need a list, and jumping ahead slightly, I'm going to need a list, a dictionary of all the user attributes and their type. So effectively, I created that by going here, asking for each item in the list of user attributes, and then I created a dictionary object, and I said, for this, I want the attributes, the value of the attribute type for the thing in the list. And so this is what gives me this string. So I have 3 attributes, and I have, that's 1, second one, third one. And then what I'm going to do is I take that and I store it. I store it in a path. I basically make a path, store it in the path, set the prototype to code. I'll come back to that in just a second. And then, and only then, I write the text into it. So why am I setting a prototype? Well, because I don't want any auto correction of hyphens becoming M dashes, or dicking around with quotes and the type there. All valid stuff when you're working in sort of print era typesetting stuff, but we're playing data here. We don't want any of that stuff. So you might think, well, why not use the action prototype? But this is action code. So I don't want, one of the things with an action prototype is you are signaling to Tinderbox that this is action code. You might need to look at it. You might find a function in there or something. This is data that I don't want modified in terms of any of the characters, but and I don't need syntax color or anything, but I just need to make sure it doesn't get played with. And the built-in prototype code, this one here, which is on the built-in prototypes, is ideal for that. Now I had to add that there isn't a mechanism via action code, for instance, to add a specific prototype. I may be wrong, but I'm pretty certain that's not the case. So I added that manually beforehand. So going back to my stamp. So the first bit here is I made the information that's going to allow the new document to create, in this case, 3 new attributes of the correct type. Then I went back and I thought, oh, I'm going to need all the other things. It might be the number of lines to show. It might be the description. It might be the default value. They may be blank, but they may have value. And if they have value, obviously I want to set that the same way in the new document. And it turns out it's actually really quite nice, because if I just show attribute, so the, oops, not that one. If I go to the, if I call the attribute command with the name of an attribute, what I actually get back is a dictionary with all these settings. Now, I actually don't need I don't need to know the category, and I already know the type, but it doesn't matter. It's easy to just take the whole thing, soup to nuts, and not waste any time trying to just say, oh, I only want, 3 of the 5 or something. And by looping, by basically making a loop, and I won't go dive into the detail of all of it here, but basically that allowed me to make a similar string, which I'll show you in just a moment, and then I do exactly the same thing, and I write it into a file, into a note, and I can show that way here. So the end of my process is this stamp has created this container, and in it deliberately two separate notes. One is the list of user attribute names and their data type, and the other one, it's all rolled up so the line breaks are taken out. But for instance, for the test string, this that I've just highlighted, so we've got its category as user, it has no sequential value, it has 3 lines showing, it's not read-only, its type is string, description is a test for string values, suggested values are dog, cat, cow, and there is no default value. Then what I can do, and this is the fairly manual bit, is I can go into another document. So in my target document, I've started by, I've added in the hints folder, and I've actually added in the code prototype because I kind of knew already I want that. And then I copied across those same 3 documents as I had before. The reason I used a container is it just makes it easier to grab the whole lot at once. The thing to check, I also checked manually once I got in, was that these had connected up with the right prototype. If they didn't, a good idea would be to just right click, I don't for those 2, but for these 2 would be to right click, and if it wasn't showing code as ticked, you'd click that would set code. And it just means, again, if you go and look at any of these, then they are the same. And in fact, if I pull this up here, that's the source, just so you can see there's nothing up my sleeve. So it's exactly the same data, but all I've done here, this bit is manual, this is copy paste. But as I say, the whole point of this demo was an exploration of the challenge that Mike said, well, we were having this conversation, there was says, well, how hard can it be? And I thought, well, that's interesting. So the next point is, I obviously need to use this information to create the user attributes. So I have a stamp, which in this case, it's not shown in the other document. I would have stored in the source document, copied across and put in the stamps folder of the new document. What does this one do? Well, it says, okay, what I want you to do is I want you to make me a dictionary using the data that we stored in the make new user attribute data. And then what I want you to do is I want you to iterate through it, and for each item in that, each key in that dictionary, I want you to make an attribute using the value stored in the type of that attribute, of that, sorry, to use the, correction, let me go back, and I misexplained this. So this is a dictionary where the key name is the name of the attribute, and the value of the key is the type we want, which means that I can say, what I want you to do is I want you, for each key, I want you to make an attribute that whose name is the key name and whose type is the value of the attribute. And lo and behold, if I go to bring back in the inspector, I have 3 attributes. Now, the next part is that there are some other bits and pieces we want to do. So again, we go and read our stored data. Then what I'm going to do is I'm basically going to do the same thing, except that rather than iterate every property, because I know I'm not going to set some things, there are only 4 that I really want, which is the default value if there is one, the description if there is one, the number of lines to display if that data type allows it, and suggested values if there are any. So essentially, I go and look at this list, and its keys are the names of the attributes. So I turn that into a list, v keys. I take this list. So I'm basically going through a list that is the name. So the first one is going to be test string. And I say, for that, what I want you to do is I want you to go and look at this information up here. And I want you to hand me back the part of the dictionary that pertains to the attribute name, which in this case is test string in the first item of the loop. And then what I want you to do is I just want you to set its default value to the value in the stored data. Same for description, same for lines, same for suggested. Now this is the bit that doesn't work yet because we tripped over 2 interesting things, which were more the unexpected. I mean, the sort of thing that you might rush to think this is a bug. Well, not really. One of the issues that's shown is this here. When you actually, the data that comes out of Tinderbox doesn't actually put lists in list markers. Why? Well, actually that's quite comparatively new markup. And normally Tinderbox just correctly guesses that these 3 values are a list that form the value of the suggested property, and it detects that this is the next key. It so happens that when running the stamp I showed you, this fails. And the other thing I discovered is that it turns out that you can't do this. Although you can read from attribute using a variable or an attribute, a value stored in an attribute, you can't write to it. So I can write, if I change that to being it will work, but if I leave it if I parameterize it, because in Michael's example, there probably would have been 20 or 30 attributes, and obviously you don't want to type each one of those by hand. So that's something that doubtless may get addressed, but I thought it useful to still show you the demo because it shows you can get most of the way, and indeed if you needed to, you could hard code this. If that was your need and you wanted to do this sort of idea today, there is a way to do it. And the other thing is that if you are storing information, even if you're getting past something by the application at the moment, if you know you've got a list in there, there's no harm in actually just going in and putting those square brackets, which are essentially telling Tinderbox this is a list. Because those of you who've been playing this game for a while will remember back in the day that it just magically worked out what was a list and what wasn't a list. Essentially, if you give it a string, some text that has a semicolon in the middle of it, it says, oh, that's a list with 2 items. That predates the comparative complexity of dictionaries as they came along, and we're making it even more complicated here because essentially I have a dictionary that is the value of the key in the main dictionary. So I've got nested dictionaries, and inside my nested dictionary I have a value that is a nested list. So it's sort of not your basic activity. And I wouldn't, the takeaway here is not to think, oh, it's broken. Far from it. Oops, sorry. Lost my, there we go. So you can do most of this, and the bits that don't quite work fully at the moment, doubtless will in due course when we've bottomed out what the unforeseens are. The point about not being able to, I'll hand over to Mark in a second. I see a hand's gone up. A point to bear in mind that I think is another thing that you will find occasionally is that when you have parameters, inputs to an operator. So in this case, we've got the attribute, and this bit here says to Tinderbox, well, which attribute do you want me to look at, to read from or to write to? Over time, as action code has got more complicated, the number of ways that we can signal this has grown massively. It used to be you either put a literal value in, or probably you might have stored it in something like my string and put that in there. So one thing to check for if you do something that doesn't work, as I discovered, the thing is to step back and think, right, put a hard-coded value in and see if it works. If it does work, what that's telling you is that for whatever reason, your variable is not working. You could go and check that and check it's the right value. If the variable is the right value and it's not working as a variable, it probably means that for whatever reason, that operator at the moment doesn't accept a parameter as a variable. And that's something you can pass into Mark. These things essentially are unexpected, but if you pause to think of the number of combinations of all the operators in this system, and that unlike sort of computer language, this is not like something like Java or Python where someone sat down at an outset to make a very sort of rigid structure. What we've got here is sort of 20 years of ad hoc growth, because we, the users, keep sending the developer things saying, you know what, it'd be really cool if I could just do that, and what comes along with that. So that gets allowed, and you get these little edge cases where something we never really thought about particularly becomes possible. So we've got this big toolbox, and with this wonderful number of combinations, and every so often you come up with a combination that in principle should be possible, but possibly isn't in this very moment. And don't rush to interpret it necessarily as what you may term a bug. It's not an error. It may be simply that as it stands, it's not quite wide up for that. Mark.
Two speculative ideas, one kind of small, but one less small. For a workaround on the suggested not returning a naked list instead of a properly wrapped list, since you know that it's currently returning a naked list, you could in your loop wrap it automatically with the brackets. But the 40,000-foot view of this is you're using a stamp to generate some text that will be moved to a new document, and then a stamp in the new document will interpret that text and do things. And that's a perfectly sensible way to do it. An even crazier way to do it would be to have the stamp in the first document generate some text which is in fact a function, and programmatically does all of this, in which case you can also solve the second problem, I believe, and avoid and just do all the tedious stuff in a function.
Well, I'm really glad you brought that up, because in fact, I see Dave's hands up as well, but I just top and tail this, because the other tail piece I was going to put into this is when I finish this, I was thinking, do you know what? Given all the things that I actually have to do by hand, like the sort of other things that I still have to do, like put some of the prototypes in place, that maybe what I really should be doing is using something like AppleScript for this. So again, I'm deliberately exposing. So I set down to do something that should be possible. I got some 90% of the way there, and it is possible with a bit of sort of hand adjustment to get there. But also, it was a reminder that this is a good example where I think the learning lesson is probably what I should do now is go away and implement this in probably with an AppleScript, because then I can talk to the two things. I can even make the new Tinderbox file. I can sort of add the bits in by driving the menus if I need to add things like prototypes and the like. And it sort of lessens some of the uncertainty. And I think it's a good reminder that, you know, that the way you started out, the temptation is that I decided I'd do this, so I will keep on, and I'm still here hours later, and I will get to the end. But whether it was really the right choice in the benefit of hindsight is something to bear in mind. And the whole point of some of us doing this is so the rest of you don't have to. And eventually we will have a solution for this. Dave.
Yeah, I was Mark and I were discussing in the chat for that section there where you cannot iterate an attribute and assign those other values because it won't accept an attribute as a variable as the thing you're operating on. You have to put the actual name of the attribute. Why not? My thought was you could create a little template, export template from your list of attributes, and then basically have the export template populate all of that information. And in the preview, you would just copy it and then paste it into your stamp. Now that is more manual, but the template portion would be a one-time thing to grab all the values of your attributes. I don't know how you would know when to stop. I mean, there would be a different number of attributes, presumably in each document. How many of those export lines do you need? There's probably a way to do that. But I just thought it occurred to me you could do something with export templates, grab that data, and then just paste it back in manually. But function.
I could probably also do something like this. It just occurred to me as you were speaking. Well, I need a single quote there because I'm going around double quotes.
There you go. That's genius.
And yeah, that's it. And then we want to close that. So I haven't tried this, but I think this would actually work, because what I'm doing here is this inserts the literal string into this bigger string. So action reads all these inputs. So these bits are literal text, and then that bit in there, and that's another bit of dynamic. So but the result of that then becomes one string, and the action says, right, go run this action. And I suspect that will work. So there's I'm kicking myself now. I should have thought of this, but I still go back to the point. And I think the reason I want to show it is just, you know, it's fine for me to be able to say, so I did all this and I didn't get to where I started. And perhaps on reflection, I should have taken a different route. But already we've had several solutions, all of which get us really, you know, towards the end. So Chuck, you have a hands up.
Yes, I was just going to say, I was about to suggest the action approach because that's what I ran into when dealing with a very similar problem with link creation and link manipulation, where the operator I wanted to use did not take an operand that was a variable. And the trick you just outlined is exactly what solved the problem. So yes, there are times. And I think the only thing that I would observe is it's sometimes difficult to know when you're going to run into one of these problems, and you can wind up spending a fair amount of debugging time trying to figure out, you know, why doesn't this work? And you know, the suggestion would be, of course, ATB ref should be telling everybody exactly which of these work and which don't work, but as you're demonstrating, it's not always easy to determine that. So again, playing games with debugging tools and logging can help find these problems if you run into them. So, you know, there can be an approach that says, I may run into this issue, I may run into this problem with an operand not being accepted. How can I figure it out? Well, you know, write yourself some log results as you run your code, and you will begin to figure out where it is falling apart. And as you said earlier, plug it in and make sure that it works the way you want with literal strings, and then you can begin to work the problem through. But that action solution seems to be a common way to get around this issue in general.
I was trying to, for some reason, and thank you for that, because as you were doing that, I thought I'd try this out. So I've tried the stamp, and now for some reason my Mac refuses to show me the inspector. I don't know where it's hidden it, but I'm pretty certain that probably this tweak here would have solved that. But anyway, so it just
you've got the you're missing some parentheses there.
Yes, I absolutely am. Oh, and what to save my shame, I took out was an awful lot of logging as well, as you may have guessed. There was an awful lot of, well, that ought to work. But it's fun. It's fun. I mean, you know, I did it because I enjoyed it, and it took rather longer than I thought. But you know, I won't have to make those mistakes again. But I don't know where. It's probably something to do with Zoom sitting on top of something. So, no, I don't know where it's gone. For my apologies. I was going to try and show you the inspector and see whether it had run, but no, not on that screen. Not on. So I've got several screens, but none of them will confess to owning the inspector. Oh, there it is. Huh. Right behind the chat window. I do apologize. So let's just see. Oh yes, I've got a. Interestingly, I didn't get the description. Oh, I know why. Because yeah, right. Okay, I know why. Because I didn't. Let me. No. Oh, that one. That's what I want. This should. Huh. So I'm not going to the descriptions, but I've definitely got that, which I didn't get before. So I'm making progress.
Yeah, I'll comment that one of the things I was fooling around with doing something very similar to this. Actually, I hate to say it, about a year and a half ago, and gave up because there were several things I could not get to work at that time. I believe they've all been addressed by recent enhancements to Tinderbox. But one of the problems I kept running into was being able to write the description. So maybe that's still an issue to be addressed. The only thing I was unable to do at the time was write the description.
Indeed, and you know, but again, actually, this is a good example in a way for people. I know it's a sort of not a example where it's resolved at the end, but so it looks as though there are 2 or 3 nested things here, you know, unexpected things, and you just peel them away one at a time. So
you're missing the pluses, aren't you, on the and attributes on the second line?
No, I've got a plus. I've got a plus there, plus there, plus there. String plus.
Don't those attribute plus and go left? Go left. Right there. Go down. Plus.
Ah. See, it always helps. I'm glad that someone in the class is paying attention.
2 points, Dave.
Oh, there we go. Right. So there you go. Well done, sir. take a gold star. Yes. So we fixed that. So one of the things I said was a problem turns out to not be a problem, because wonderfully another thing in the Action Code Tinderbox, you know, the Action Code toolbox has sorted that out. Anyway, unless there are more questions, I'll sort of park that there. Obviously, I'll give the files to Michael to share with people.
Yeah, I actually do have a question though. How did you get what's the call for description again? It's just description, right?
Description.
Yeah.
So if you want to know where these things are, is if you go to this article in it's under the action code list here.
Okay.
And these are the available. You don't get them for every. One of the things of doing this is I realize I can add to this article, so you don't get all the categories, all the things in that bullet list for everything. So, for instance, only number type attributes use sequential, and I think it's only set, list, and string that use suggested value lists. And there'll be some other variants. So one of my jobs now is to actually go through explicitly and look at what I get out of the attribute if I call the attribute for a given data type. See what this is very edge case stuff. It shouldn't be anybody's great problem, but I mean, the things you can do it yourself, and in due course I'll have had this. It'll be an ATV ref, and then you'll just be able to look it up. It's because it's not something most people need. One of the things, the reason this section is here in the article is basically it's just trying to indicate what what you're going to get back. If you ask for the description, you're going to get back a string. If you ask for the default, you may get nothing. You may get an empty list, or you may get a list. And in due course, that will probably, I suspect, come back in a wrap up. Does that answer your question, Michael?
Yeah, it does. But I kind of want to show an alternative if we can.
Okay.
Maybe not an alternative, but a different
Dave,
idea.
before we dive into that, do you have a further question?
Yeah, I need to get back to the 50,000 foot view. What exactly what is the purpose? What are we?
Yeah, that's what I was going to show.
That's exactly. Why did you waste all this time? Yeah, very kind of you to ask. To loop back, it was because no, there is a perfectly valid use case. Michael's been working on basically some function libraries, which he wants to be able to share either for himself or with others from document to document. The problem is copying the libraries easy, but if you don't have the other bits of setup that you need, then you can't run it. And okay, you could write a note at the top saying you need to do the following, and that's one explanation. But we fell down the rabbit hole, said, well, surely it'd be possible to set this up automatically. And it turns out that by and large it is. There are still one or two things that you might need to do by hand. And again, if you only do this once a year, if at all, well, why would you bother? But if you have built, say, a complicated library such as Michael has, and he's got maybe 60 attributes, not just one. And if every time you want to use this library, you've got to go and manually set up 60 attributes, that's sort of a pain in the backside. So
Can you not save a Tinderbox document with that library and those attributes as a, what they used to call it, stationary?
Stationary file. Yes, you could. I mean, the issue sort of becomes that what happens with these things every time they grow. So that each time somebody comes up said, "Oh, I tried this, it didn't work." The library will add another bit of code that fixes something, and maybe talk to another attribute they didn't have before, and the saved. And then you forget to update the saved file. So it's another angle of the where's that piece of paper I had in my hand yesterday? It's obviously what you want. It just turns out you don't have it, or you can't find it easily. So the idea here is that at the point where you want to move something, that you can automate its creation using the state as it is at the moment, rather than say the one you did last week that it turns out is slightly out of place. So your idea is absolutely valid. And just a reminder that stationary files are still a thing to use. And there's more than one way to do this. And I would say that unless you are trying to shift around large amounts of user attributes, which is the problem we were really trying to address here, then this may well be overkill.
And finally, you actually copy a note or something?
I did. I'm still showing it.
I didn't know you could copy notes between documents.
I'll just so I don't mess up the thing I've been doing here. So where's my source? So basically what I did was, because if I do that, I get everything that's inside. So those notes have come through.
Well, knock me over with no, you could do that.
So if I step ahead and say, okay, well, I know I want to use the code prototype, so we can check again. So we'll go in here. And so they picked up the prototype. Again, I'm being, and there's an excessive caution here. I've just been bitten too many times, because what happens is you go in here, you look at something, you only got to do something that tells the application that, as far as it's concerned, you made an edit, and then it does all the things you, in a sense, asked it to do, like tidy up, make all the quotes look nice. And now you're in a different world of pain. So that the idea of using the code prototype is simply say, no, I absolutely know this is code. I absolutely know it's code. I don't want executed in any way by the app, but I do want it not altered in any way. Again, I'm probably sort of being a bit over detailed. Michael,
yeah, so let me share my screen. I'll show you real quick. All right, so here's a concrete example And these are the pieces that I'm pulling together. So I've got this really extensive series of libraries as Mark has shown, and I've probably got 30 or 40 of these that I'm trying to pull together and put to, and make available through my school and the courses that I'm teaching. And the idea is, and my concept here is to give people the fundamentals of Tinderbox, but at the same time, give them functioning templates and functioning libraries so that they can actually write their book, right? And then and then they can come at the problem from both sides. How do I actually have everything I need in Tinderbox to be able to write my book? And then how to and know enough of the fundamentals that I understand enough of what's going on so I can actually get my job done. And then over time, I can go through all the stuff that Becker's provided me, so I can deconstruct it and learn more as my interests are come to bear. And so the simplified approach of what I've been thinking about is you create a let me pull up my make sure it's on the screen. Do you guys see my hang on? There you go. So the simplest idea is, I have, and I'll show you kind of the log. Let me clear this log and show you. So I have a very extensive template, and that template has attributes in it. And so as the producer of this template, the first thing I do is I go through and I run a stamp that says, go grab in this demonstration the type and description and the names of the attributes that I have in this template, because this template cannot run, or this action code cannot run without in a file without those necessary attributes. So if I apply this, you'll see that it populates a set, and it also shows me, these are the attributes that are being used in this template. And and it's even pulling in the description, like is yes children. It's a Boolean, and typos, but I'll fix that later. Informs the template whether or not you want the children of this note to be converted into a bulleted list. So I've basically, those are the attributes that this library will need to function in another template. So now a bunch of automagical hand waving, once I'm done with this effort, and in partnership with Mark here. Let's say I now go to I've got a brand new Tinderbox file I'm working on. Let me pull this over onto the screen. Brand new Tinderbox file that I'm working on, and I want to bring this library over. So what I can do is I copy the library, I paste it into the note, and you'll see up here in the My Set, and I'm using My Set because My Set is a pre-system generated set that will always guaranteed to be in a Tinderbox file. This library knows that it needs to have those attributes. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually turn this into, let's say, like category : set, is yes list children : Boolean. So I'll be passing the types that are necessary with that. And there is an issue of passing descriptions, but we'll come to that in a minute. But let's say I've now got this in the function. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to have an edict associated with this note. And if someone checks that edict, it's going to say create attributes. But I haven't set that edict yet up. So let me show you what the stamp's going to look like or we can do it on the fly right now. So let's do it on the fly right now because it can't hurt. So we'll go here.
Just a quick one. A good reason to actually capture the type of the attribute is that it's something I don't think you can change via action code. You can change in the inspector. So if you've got the list of the names of the attributes and their type, then the step that you're about to do becomes easier because you can make.
No, exactly. So we'll say, if is create attributes equals true, then I want you to run the stamp. And at the end of that stamp, set this to false. Okay, so let's say now I've copied this file over, and again, I because I've only had a few minutes while we've been talking to set this up, but I've copied this file into this new Tinderbox file, and if you notice here in this Tinderbox file, there are currently no there's the one user generated attribute is created true. And actually what this needs to be, because it's being brought over into a it's being brought over into a Virgin file. We have an is Boolean.
My Boolean.
Oh, my Boolean, yeah, my Boolean. So I need to use my Boolean, not my own generated attribute, because it is a Virgin file. Right. So if I say is my Boolean equals true, run this code. If not, and shut it off. And so I've copied over this rather extensive library over into a new Tinderbox file. I check that box. The code runs if I did it right. I did it wrong. Okay. And if we now look at the user attributes, the file, all of the user attributes needed for this file have been generated. Right. And so my thought about this approach of doing this is that step, as Mark's going to do, is I'll first create the list of attribute name, type, and then I'll have this my Boolean, my set strategy here. So whenever these libraries get copied over to a new file, all someone will need to do is check the Boolean list. And then once that's done, I'll actually have Tinderbox. It can't hurt. I'll either have Tinderbox turn off the edict or erase the edict, so that you're not having a bunch of unnecessary stuff running in the background. And quite possibly what I might do as we're talking about this, and Art, let me finish this one thought, and then you can talk. Will that work? Yeah. If you might have a rule running that says something like if edict disabled equals true, then show turn on edicts. Right. So you could have something like this running. So if I did turn off the edict in this case, then turn on edict would pop up or something, so that it just kind of reminds the user, like, the thing's not working because your edict's not turned on. So those are the kinds of like little things I'm trying to think through that would help somebody use it. Art, you have a question?
No, I just wanted to appreciate all the work you guys have put in. It's such a beautiful idea, and particularly, I think, so universally adaptable for me if I'm sort of hiving off projects into something new and I just want to carry the attributes with me. So practical. Thank you. And in fact,
Yeah,
thinking of
yeah.
the Christmas tree
Go
kind of thing, 'cause you can add other things that you want to transport as well, or notes or anything.
Yeah, and the primary use of this is for templates and for action code. And honestly, just being totally Randian selfish, it's all about me, right? I find myself copying templates over into another file, and I'll spend 45 minutes figuring out why the template's not working, and then I'll go into the depths of the file and realize there's this single little attribute that I forgot to create in the new file. And
Oh,
so
for
this is going
sure.
to this is going to save me time.
And
then you
another,
could also set that the equal to, so that if you've already transferred over some attribute before, that you won't overwrite something.
Correct.
The array, yeah. Cool. Excellent. Thank you.
and as Michael reminded me, if you did go down the AppleScript route, you can always use Tinderbox via run command to call
To trigger AppleScript
via the command line. So we can even reach out that way and do the automation. So there are lots of ways to get to the endpoint.
Yeah. All right, we are about 4 minutes over. That was a really fun little. Got 2 big things done today. That was good. So, anybody have any final comments, remarks, or anything like that? But before we run off and get ready for the Super Bowl, for those that are so inclined to watch it.
Just
Well,
one
happy
quick
Super
one.
Bowl, you guys.
Yeah,
Just
go
one
for it.
quick comment. You were talking about copying notes from one document to another. just so it doesn't get overlooked, I believe it is perfectly possible to just drag a section of notes from one document to another.
You can, but that causes a problem. Let me think about it. What was it?
I tried it the other day, and I just got like the title of the note and the text was empty. I figure, okay,
Yeah.
notes between Tinderbox.
I think the issue is that it's getting treated as if you're dropping a file. So Tinderbox is trying to do the right thing, but we haven't really indicated what we're actually doing is dropping a note rather than say some file we brought in from Finder.
Yeah, and if you look into Backstage, this happened to me a few weeks ago when I was creating my automatic installer for my foundational template. Is when you drag stuff over, the children of that drag note actually don't come along with it. So what you need to do is you need to copy the note and paste it, and then that's how all of the children in the structure carry over. And there's some logical reason for it, but I don't remember what that logical reason is.
Yeah, Mark, I was trying to drag stuff from Groundhog Day into Marmot, and all I got was a title and no text. So I don't know what went wrong, but I just gave up and said, okay, I can't copy it that way. I have to do something else.
But you can copy paste without a problem.
Yeah, well, Mark just drag and drop it, and you got both the title and the text, I guess, right? You dragged and dropped the note.
Yeah, but remember, as we just said though, Dave, if you drag a note with a nested list of containers under that note, those don't carry over, or they don't carry over in the expected way. And in my context, I had a bunch of action code that was dependent on those children. You know, and I had people telling me, "Hey, I just bought this template and it's broken," and I'm like, "Well, no, you got to copy, paste, not drag," and that what's opened up a whole bunch of insight.
Okay.
Awesome. Well, this was fun today, guys and gals. Appreciate it.
Thanks so much.
Alrighty.
Oh, Eagles.
We'll see ya. Bye bye.